Rounder Report, Season 1, Episode 14.
Hello. You know, I forgot my coffee. I left it over there.
Do you want to go get it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go and get it. You'll excuse me a minute while you press the allow button. Yes. There we go. Hopefully during the proceedings I won't need a piss. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So, there we go. The PM, the Prime Minister, is gone. Well,
Long
he's
live the Prime
resigned.
Minister.
And it's more a case of going, but not quite gone yet. What a tumultuous week it was last week.
Has been.
Yeah. So, COVID in your household, of course.
No COVID for me, thankfully.
No, again, you've got away with it. This I find incredible.
2.5 years, no COVID.
2.5 years, no COVID. You'll excuse the knocking sound, gentlemen.
By the way,
I've
gone and bought myself a antibody testing kit. So I need to provide a blood sample and send it off to a facility where they'll check whether or not I've ever had COVID antibodies.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to do that
You've
later
been
today.
exposed to it. Oh, that's interesting. Let me know.
Well, we'll do. That's the plan, because I'm thinking it's almost impossible that I haven't had at least a dose of it of some sort, even if I've only had a mild glance kind of thing.
But you haven't been anywhere, have you, to be fair? Very far. You've not really been venturing into dangerous places. Well, neither have I.
Went to France, went to Amsterdam. I've been to Dublin for a wedding.
Yeah.
So you'd think, at least in one of those places where there were more people than usual, that I'd have picked something up, but
Touch wood.
not yet, thankfully.
Yeah. Well,
But luckily my partner is doing well. She had relatively mild symptoms, but she still has a few lingering, like you were saying.
Yeah. Did you have the old coffee?
No.
The head cold from hell job.
Head colds.
It's the worst head cold.
Fever and chills for the first 2 days.
Yeah, I got to tell you, when I got the last lot of Omicron, this one with the symptom of the head cold, fuck me, it is the worst. It's the head cold from hell. It is the worst. I mean, I could have tolerated all the other symptoms, including the fever, but the addition of the head cold from hell, where sometimes I would do multi-sneezes to the point that if I happened to be in the upright position, I'd end up on the floor because it'd be like one sneeze would hit you before you'd finish the other. And then again and again. She didn't
get any of that.
Oh, it was horrible. So anyway, while your better half was resting up,
I'm the better half.
I hope you're listening to this, my dear. There's room for words when he gets home. While all that was happening, Boris has had to concede that he's no longer wanted. And, you know, how quick the polished or not so polished videos and pamphlets, glossy booklets and the like of the main contenders competing to replace the deposed leader appeared.
MPs not having working class friends is always a good way to get votes. As per have you not heard that?
How do you mean?
There was a video that surfaced of Rishi Sunak. When he was at university.
Oh, yes.
He was asked a whole load of questions. One being, what sort of friends do you have? And he said, I have most of my friends are sort of upper class and upper middle class and working class. And then he sort of paused and was like, no, I don't really have any working class friends. Or I don't know many working class people. And bear in mind, it was probably a long time ago that he said it, but it probably doesn't look so good.
Later prescription. We digress. Excuse me, we digress. We digressed past. I hope the phone doesn't ring again. I mean, I am amazed this week I haven't had one of those survey calls. First week in months I've not had one.
It's on holiday.
But yeah, it's. I work on the principle now that if I can see through these glasses, which I can aptly well, this is not the latest prescription. I've had a prescription since these, so these are about 4 years. Prescriptions about 4 years ago. Then I don't need to be changing them, because every time you change prescription, you rely on them more and more and more until you're completely blind. Which, as you know, I discussed on one of the other podcasts about having to use a magnification 10 times mirror as well as the glasses in order to have a shave. Which you can see I'm not doing at the moment. Well, you can't see on here. You see? There we go. Anyway.
Magic of the camera.
Huh?
Magic of the camera.
Magic of the camera. Yes. So, yes, all those glossy booklets. So Rishi doesn't have any friends.
No.
Yeah. He has even less now after. I mean, they've really stuck the knife into him this week, haven't they? Oh dear, bless him.
Interesting timing as well. I thought that as soon as they announced Boris's resignation, within less than 24 hours, Keir Starmer was cleared of all wrongdoing, which is
well, they were waiting for that result.
Oh,
yes, they had been waiting for it for a while.
So they just happened to release it straight after the
well,
fact
it
that Boris
needed. Obviously, the country is in a state of flux.
Oh, obviously.
And clearly, he didn't do anything wrong.
Clearly, he did.
No, clearly he didn't.
Well,
because
clearly
they didn't give him a fine.
But he clearly did do something wrong, and it's clearly obvious. But they just found him clear
This
of wrongdoing.
is only because you're a Tory.
No,
it's a bit different from the 126 fixed penalty notices that number 10 Downing Street got.
So he was caught. He was shown to have been drinking at his offices, but apparently that's
campaign office, yes.
Okay, campaign office.
And had a curry.
But
yes.
apparently that's not against the rules.
No.
No.
Because they looked at it.
Because the police said so.
They took a lot of evidence
and
decided that.
Because the police said so.
Yes, they decided is
because the police said so.
Because the police said so.
Okay, well there you go then. That's fine. So he's done nothing wrong.
So there we go.
But anyway, it's strange timing. Is all I'll say to that.
No, I didn't get anything strange about it at all. I expected it. I mean,
coming from a Labour supporter, it's quite odd that you.
Well, you're coming from a Tory supporter. It doesn't surprise me. You're making those comments. Well, of course. But the bottom line is, at least he said, look, if I get an on the spot, if I get a fine, I'll resign. Which is a bit different from Boris. No, there were no parties, and no rules were broken. And it turned out there were 126 rules broken. Because there were 126 fines and about 18 parties. Anyway, he's gone.
He's gone.
But not quite. And there's a bunch of wannabes jostled for the top job while resorting to all sorts of tactics to hamstring their opposite numbers, like pointing out that Penny Mordaunt had accidentally got a picture or video of Oscar. I murdered my girlfriend Pistorius. It's not really a good ad to have in your video. And obviously she was showing sporting clips which she should have had to have paid for.
Well, yeah, the Paralympian asked his images to be removed.
Yes.
Didn't he? Because he said I didn't allow this, so you need to take it off.
Exactly. So questions again regarding her judgment straight off, or those that she's hired.
Her PR team or whoever.
Their PR team, a bit rubbish. So, but amazing how quick everybody's been to produce these videos and glossy booklets and bits and pieces.
Almost
anybody think that the game was afoot well before the resignation, which of course it was.
Well, they were probably done a year ago, more than likely, or within a year.
Well, I know, obviously,
getting ready for potential changes of.
Well, I know Liz Truss was in the papers a few months ago, where she'd done some photo shoot, which was clearly a stab at the leadership, or in preparation of, where she sat there with that usual smug grin.
Yeah, good luck. I'm sure you're going to do just fine in the leadership race.
With her brown leathers on. But there you go.
What did they call her? The pound shop Thatcher. Pound shot Thatcher.
Oh my God, this is going to be an entertaining competition, isn't it? If there was a need for a Simon Cowell type judge to oversee it, to oversee this, it's right now.
Well, can we ask?
Otherwise, we end up with a dodgy ventriloquist from BGT.
Can we ask Simon?
Or a dog act.
Can we ask you very quickly then? What are the chances of a snap election? What are the chances of Labour actually coming into power? You know, do you think it's much more likely now than it's ever been?
What for Labour to return to?
For Labour to return
yes.
to power.
I do. There's a number of factors, I think, and it's only my humble opinion.
Yeah, no, obviously coming from your side of things.
But for starters, Corbyn was very polarising. Didn't appeal to a large part of what is the middle ground, centre left in the Labour Party. That obviously you had all those issues, anti-Semitism and what have you, dogging the party, whereas with the Tories it's just dogging. Generally that they get caught out for. And then obviously on top of that, so you've had the leadership change, you've had that repair job, and then you've really, the bottom line to it is you take all those to one side, including Partygate and the mess that the Tories currently find themselves in, and you've got two or three big determining factors, and one is 12 years the Tories have been in government, and it's hard to keep reselling the same brand when clearly now it looks like failure. Brexit is past and it's about accepting what is, but even so...
But a lot of Labour don't accept Brexit, so what happens, don't
get me wrong, there was a lot of Labour that was for Brexit.
But there has to be...
partially why the Red Wall vote
Yeah, but hold on a second, there has to be one unifying stance on Brexit. And so what do you think Labour's stance should be? Just accept the results and then make concessions?
They have.
Try to roll back certain elements?
No, well, I think obviously that's exactly what they've said, but I don't think Brexit is the determining factor, because people mentally have kind of moved on. And the determining factor, even in the next month or two, they'll have moved on from Partygate.
That'll disappear.
They won't have moved on necessarily from the sleaze. That's going to leave a sour taste because there's been so much of it. So it's not just about Boris. It's also about those bits of poor judgment in getting rid of MPs quick enough that that were guilty of wrongdoing. Whether we've seen.
But he was Foreign Secretary at the time. Let's not forget. I mean, he wasn't necessarily. He might have heard of some sort of issues that were going on, but it wasn't. So when the person that was found touching other MPs, what was his name?
Oh yeah.
But apparently when there were first allegations. Boris Johnson was Foreign Secretary, not Prime Minister.
No.
Apparently he was informed that there was some sort of dodginess happening, but he apparently just swept it under the carpet, saying it's not enough of an issue.
No, mate, he's a bit handsy.
Yeah, he's a bit handsy.
And what was his name? Something by name, something by nature.
Pincher.
Pincher by name, Pincher by nature. That's it. So the point is, it was bad judgment, and clearly he lied about it, and clearly the issue that's forced Boris out is the fact that he was sending his ministers out, having told them he didn't know jack shit, and then it turning out 2 days later he did know jack shit. So it's been a build-up, but I think even that'll pass it in short term. But there'll be an overhang of it, because the fact of the matter is, once again, the Tory party has been dogged by sleaze allegations. However, the most important factor as to why I expect a return of a Labour government is 12 years down the line, 12 years from austerity, the beginning of austerity, 12 years down the line, we now have a serious, very serious cost of living crisis that has not yet even been addressed properly by the Tory party, the government. And the issue with that is because whilst all this self-annihilation has been going on within the Tory government over Boris's
What's
stewardship.
Labour's record on the economy?
No, we're not talking about Labour. The point is what makes people thirst for change.
Change, yeah.
And and don't get me wrong. No matter what the Tories might say, under Tony Blair, employment went down, unemployment went down, the social mobility improved massively. He brought in the Decent Homes Initiative. He brought in the minimum wage. There was a whole bundle of things that were done, and so historically, the Labour Party do have some very strong things, like the NHS in 1945. They have some strong things.
And he killed a load of Iraqis.
Look, that did for him, and it did for the Labour, and it's done for them for the last 12 years. But of course, times change. People move on, and they thirst for something new. And the reality is what's ever present at the moment, and what is going to be ever present as we hit autumn. Whilst there's been this massive time of reflection and bloodletting within the Tory government with each other, is going to be the fact that suddenly people are losing their jobs. Suddenly people can't heat their home because the base price, the cap for the energy price, they reckon is going to be around 3,200.
But there's nothing.
So all these things, food prices.
But there is nothing any government can do about it. Ultimately,
that's not the point, no.
Of course, it's the point.
No, it isn't, because
it doesn't
the vast
matter,
majority of voters.
It doesn't matter which government comes in, whether it's a continuation of Conservatives or the Labour Party. They will have to contend with the worst economic situation that we've faced for potentially 70 or 80 years.
I agree.
So,
but then cast your mind back to you weren't really around at that time, or certainly would have been very young, during the mid-1970s, where you had Heath disappear, Callaghan didn't last long, you had quite a lot of chopping and changing, and principally because the thirst of the electorate will be to seek change because they think it will make a difference. But I take your point. The harsh reality is it is unlikely that anybody individually can make a difference. The argument will be whether the current leadership contest and the thirst by the contenders of this leadership contest that we could discuss it today to outwit each other are going to offer up ever more ludicrous tax cuts that in the scheme of things,
it's very short-term,
are even more dangerous for the economy because of spiking inflation further and sending us into what could be a really uncontrollable spiral of inflation, wage demands, and all the rest of it.
And
simply by the fact that they're throwing fuel on the fire, trying to.
But the UK's been hit worst out of the whole of Europe so far.
Yes.
When it comes to
it'll
this
have the
current
poorest
situation.
growth next year out in the entirety of Europe, other than Russia.
No, because Russia's doing just fine.
Well, I'm talking according to the statisticians. Can't get my teeth around that. Maybe I should get my money back from the dentist visit last week. But that's the point. My point is, I think the electorate will see change, and you will cast your mind back to the last Labour government.
I'm voting Lib Dem, by the way. I've decided.
Well, there you go. See, put your nail your political colours to the mast. You never know; they might get an extra seat. Make it 50.
Yeah. Better than the 6 they've got.
Anyway, the big issue, and you know how it works. They'll have this leadership election, which will be a lot of bloodletting. Although already they've kind of seen the propensity for this, and they don't want Boris sitting there in number 10 any longer than.
Is it September the 5th?
So yes, but of course, in the next 7 days they'll have whittled it down to just 2. So they've made the benchmark for nominations. You've got to have 20 MPs nominate you, which could mean that at the end of today, when the nominations close, that Sajid Javid, for example, is already out of the mix because he only had 13 yesterday.
And when does Parliament close for the summer session? That must be happening soon.
Well, yes, it happens in the next week or two, I believe.
Right.
It's in July, so it's this month. So until September, and of course they open on September the 5th, which is when they'll be able to announce the new leader. So my point is this: they've got this by next week. We'll have whittled it down to 2. Then it goes to the hustings and goes out to the and on September the 5th they'll have a result of which one is going to be the new leader. Now my question is this: my point is this. Firstly, the new leader. If they hang about too long without an election, the electorate, as they did with Gordon Brown, will deem that they are there, but that the vast majority of the electorate didn't actually vote for them.
Yeah.
And the longer that leader waits to have an election, the worse that situation is going to get for them. So I expect an election by next May. It could be a snap election in October, November of this year, because I think the new leader will want to try and capitalise quickly. However, because I think the bottom line to this is the Tory party, the longer it goes on over the winter, the greater the chance the Tory party will be kicked out of office. And that's because over the winter, we will start to see the worst outcomes from the cost of living crisis, because obviously there'll be winter fuel bills involved, there'll be further inflationary rises in terms of food prices and what have you. So, as time goes on, this is only going to get worse. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see an election this side of Christmas, because that's the best hope the Tories have got of winning.
You said next Christmas?
No, this Christmas. But they might leave it till May.
You said by May.
They might leave it till May, but I would very much doubt it, because the longer they leave it, the greater the chance that they will lose, for those 2 reasons: time and the cost of living crisis. Time of a new leader being in situ without having the electorate cast an eye. So obviously they're trying to avoid, because obviously the longer the competition goes on, the worse it looks for them, because of course you can see all this bloodletting publicly has already begun. So who have we got in terms of the competitors? Let's read through the list, shall we? So we've got Tom Tugendhat, Nadine, as I call him, Who Are We? And Nadine Zahawi, Rishi Sunak, Sajid Javid, Jeremy Hunt, Penny Mordaunt, Grant Shapps, a couple I've never heard of, and after the next day or so we'll never hear of again, which is sorry Kevin Badenoch, whoever you are, Remen Kisti and Suella Braverman, which you mentioned earlier you had heard of. And of course, inimitable Liz Truss, who'd look more at home in an episode, of course, of Wallace and Gromit than as leader of the Tory party. I mean, I can't imagine being in charge. I think I find the prospect, I'm not sure whether I find it funny or comical or frightening. But there we go. I don't think the electorate. The problem, and of course I almost forgot, I can't quite make my mind up, Patel. Because obviously I don't know whether she's made her mind up overnight. I guess she was thinking about it because she has the likability factor, let's face it, of an unlanced boil. So I don't know about you. Who would you have run our country? Because out of that list, I'm not so sure that I'd have them run my bath, never mind a country.
Of all of them, it has to be Mordaunt for me. I can't imagine anyone else, to be honest.
What makes her more likable?
She seems to be
others?
the cleanest out of the lot of them, essentially. Doesn't take too much of the spotlight, hasn't made any extreme comments thus far, seems to have a quite stable outlook generally.
How was she involved in the the government in the last 2 years? What's been her role?
I don't know. What's she been up to? I have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'm interested because, you know,
What's her position?
what's her position? I don't know what her position is. Is she in the cabinet? I can't remember.
She is in the cabinet.
She is in the cabinet. She's not Minister for Brexit Opportunities. No, that was Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yeah, where's my phone gone?
And who else has there been? I can't remember what she did. There you go. You see, that's a problem because it doesn't jump out at me, whereas the others
State for Trade for the United Kingdom.
Right.
Minister
okay.
of State.
Minister of State for Trade. Yeah, and boy, is it in a state. I mean,
Yeah, not exactly her doing. So.
it's yeah, but you know what I mean is unfortunately she wears the title and has to wear some of the blame. That's how it works. But the problem I've got, of course, and this was actually pointed out by one of the Tories being interviewed on the news last night, is that anybody who's kind of propped up Boris in the cabinet, in these runners and riders, over the last few months, and in complete denial that there was ever a problem, and giving him their support, and trundling out, you know, in front of different programmes, going, "Oh no, you know, he's done all of this wonderful stuff, you know, he's delivered the pandemic." Yeah, kind of tainted. Because it looks as though it's like, oh, yeah, it's all very well now he's gone that you're all wanting to be leader. But hang on a minute, you're all kind of tainted by what's gone on.
They also have self-interest, don't they? I mean,
yeah.
In order to keep their position, they had to remain loyal to the cabinet. If they didn't, they're likely to lose their jobs. You know, you can't dismiss them for wanting to keep their position.
Oh, you can't dismiss them for their lack of principle.
Once it became untenable, then obviously I understand that sort of it's time to go. But they sort of held on for as long as they felt suitable, and then when it was no longer suitable, they were like, "I'm off."
And the only one really who hasn't kind of been sullied by that, of course, is Jeremy Hunt.
Really?
Jeremy, I look like Stan Laurel Hunt.
No, let's not forget what he did to the NHS. To essentially
well, yes, it was in the last government.
It doesn't matter which government it's in.
They've all got history.
He won't be forgotten for his incompetence.
No, exactly.
So he's not getting any kind of position whatsoever.
And his surname is just you know. It's
Again,
awkward.
Interesting how many Labour-leaning news agencies mispronounced his name
accidentally on
several occasions.
Purpose. Yes, I saw one.
You have to wonder about that.
Yeah.
It's not that difficult to say Hunt as opposed to something else.
Yes, well, somebody actually did call him Jeremy Hunt.
But it's
on
awful,
Sky, I believe.
It's incredibly disrespectful.
It is.
Regardless of whether or not you find it funny or not, it's awful. It's an awful thing to do.
It is a bit naughty. It's a bit naughty. But, you know, unfortunately, it's by the very token of the way these politicians often carry on, of course, they leave themselves well open to it. So you think Penny Mordaunt?
For no other reason that she seems to be
the worst, the best.
No, she
of a
seems
bad
to
bunch.
be the person who's least in the public eye, least being caught out for doing stupidity. So, you know, if you need someone stable to run the ship,
it's a bit awkward, isn't it?
It's good metrics.
Yeah. Come back, Simon Cowell. Hit the golden buzzer. No golden buzzer. We've got the dog out.
No, another woman.
Hey?
Another woman Prime Minister.
Yes, well.
Number 3.
Yeah, but the last two didn't go down well, did they? Certainly the last one. But
the last one was a disaster.
Bless her, Theresa May must be quite happy because she's now no longer holding the record for the shortest premiership. She's been beaten by Boris. She outlasted him.
And Boris did far more in his short premiership than May ever did. So there we go.
Yes, had far more parties. Yeah,
And he got Brexit done.
he did get Brexit done.
Well, there you go.
He got
then.
it done in he got it done in name only. It's
I
not
mean,
done.
in name only.
It's not done. It's a bloody mess. You've
I'm
got
pretty sure we're not in Europe anymore. So
Well,
therefore,
but look at
therefore he succeeded.
No, well, how do you measure
what
success?
What did Theresa May do?
Oh, well,
Absolutely nothing.
oh, she was hopeless.
Well, so
Hopeless.
she outlasted him, but did nothing.
She was dreadful.
Boris might have had a shorter
But they're all dreadful.
term, but he's
I mean,
actually
good God.
achieved something.
The good God, Cameron only had the vote because he thought he was going to win. And it's all right, don't worry about it. We're going to win the referendum. But had no plan
We did win
for
the
if he
referendum.
lost. No,
We
but
did.
he was a Remainer. He had no plan for if they lost. And we then allowed somebody into number 10 who clearly, right, who was involved with the £350 million a week thing on the side of the big red bus to the NHS, was clearly tainted as a liar before he even set foot in number 10. So I'm afraid, unfortunately, we are where we are with this absolute diabolical mess at the moment with the government because of the inner workings of the Tory party not being able to find a suitable candidate to lead them. And look at this bunch. What a bunch. I mean, really. Come on. I mean, 11 of them by last night. I mean, it's like the only one I can't see in there, who's probably would have been the best candidate, is Larry the fucking cat.
Why don't you name 5 Labour MPs that you think would make a good Prime Minister? Let's all have a good
Well,
laugh.
okay. Well, they're not in government at the moment.
That's not the point. You still have an opinion, don't you?
I do actually. There's one.
Top 3.
Emily Thornberry. All 3 of them. I know you're a bit of a big girl, Emily. But I like you.
Okay, that's
Emily
one.
Thornberry.
That's going to happen. Who else have you got?
Well, she could be in the cabinet. She would be in the cabinet. You know,
Okay.
not just knocking back the contents of the cabinet.
Okay. Emily Thornberry, who's next?
Well, I got
Starmer, obviously, because he's a
Starmer. You know, look, you know, the one thing that I will say about Starmer.
Everyone likes a wet blanket. Who's next?
I don't like it the way he combs his hair.
Because that makes a good Prime Minister. Someone
I
who
just
hair, right?
well, it just strikes me he's got dandruff. But anyway, I don't have a problem with boring, and I do like the fact that he has had another successful career outside of politics before becoming leader. So there's a couple of pluses there. But I mean, don't get me wrong.
So that's 2.
I'm not. Yeah, mate, you're right. I do struggle where it comes to any of them. This is the problem. It quite scares me that we have a lack of potential statesmen.
So you're voting
in the
Lib Dem
country.
too, then? Everyone's voting Lib Dem.
Well,
Just say yes and we'll
no,
close for the day.
I'm not so sure I can bring myself to vote for Lib Dem either. But I'll carry on voting Labour. Why? Because they have the opportunity,
Excuse
a
me.
greater opportunity. That's it. I've
Excuse
got
me.
COVID. It's all over.
Excuse me, sorry.
They have the best opportunity of taking power. Forming the next government. So you know, the problem with Liberal, I mean, it's like voting Green, isn't it?
Yeah, but at least the Lib Dem shared power at one point.
They've still only got the one seat in Brighton, the Greens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They always get the one seat.
If I moved to Brighton, I'd vote Green.
Because it's the only choice you've really got there. It's green or nothing. Especially in the local elections, right?
Mm. But, you know, yeah, I think there's such a dreadful lack of, don't get me, statesman-like figures in politics presently.
Why don't you get into politics?
I mean, really, would you, no offence, Sajid, but would you really want Sajid Javid
No.
or as Prime Minister? Liz Truss?
Absolutely not.
No, I mean it just the thought of it turns my stomach.
I think Sunak
I
has
can
been-
almost see Larry the Clap marching off down Downing Street if Liz Truss becomes PM, just going, that's it then. Fucking sort your own mice problem out.
But you know what? She can't. If she were to become PM, I'd allow her as long as she wasn't able to communicate with any sort of Russian officials at all ever, and then at least it keeps our security a bit safer.
Well, of course, as I did point out this quite some time ago in one of the episodes, is that Liz Truss, her capability in terms of diplomacy is so bad that you could almost excuse for a country for starting a bombing campaign once she's opened her mouth.
You know what it is? It's
she is
unfortunately like
unfortunate.
There are certain people who are willing to throw a punch, but would never be willing to take one back in retaliation. That's what she reminds me of. She'd be willing to throw a punch, but because she doesn't understand what consequences are, if someone punched her back, she'd cry and run to the police.
Even though she looks as though she's been punched in the mouth.
It's one of those. She has no understanding.
See, you don't think Grant Shapps has got a cat and mouse?
He's been housing minister, did nothing. Labour transport minister has done nothing.
He's been minister for transport.
Yeah, how's transport doing? How many unions have striked over the past?
So we've got Sajid. I always resign at the drop of a hat. Javid, Nadine. Who are we?
Don't know either.
Nadine Zahawi.
I still don't know.
Well, he's the guy that after
I know he's a
Rishi,
popular businessman.
after Rishi Sunak resigned as Chancellor, denies that he near blackmailed Boris into giving him the job, and then once having got the job, also denies that on his own notepaper he then told the Prime Minister to resign. I mean, really. For anyone of you who's running over the normal half an hour limit that you like to listen to these things, well, tough shit. We're rambling on a bit today because when we're done, we're done. Well, no, it'll be in a minute or two, I guess. But hey, I mean, God, what a bunch! And this is scary because they'll whittle it down quickly to 2. By the beginning of next week, there'll only be 2 runners and riders. But the point is how each of those will be in terms of electability by the country at large.
Look, ultimately,
that's the question. Are they going too quick because they're frightened of the fallout?
We get the government we deserve. It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that.
You think we really deserve it?
We are deserving of this.
We're that bad.
We are.
That we deserve shit.
Absolutely. This is the ultimate reality. It's the ultimate reality.
Well, I do question how we've managed to. I mean,
it's the ending. It's the slow burn end of whatever internal and external power we have. You look at the US and the drama that's going on there. You look at.
Well, no, don't get me wrong. I mean, Boris has behaved like Donald Trump. Mr. Denial himself. I mean, let's be about right.
I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking about the current administration. It's a disaster. You look at what's happening.
Unfortunately, American politics. I mean, we could spend hours delving into American politics.
It's Canada. Canada's a disaster. France is a disaster. Italy's a disaster.
It's all a disaster.
No, it's particularly bad now. You look at the Netherlands. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
The UK is going down the toilet.
Yeah.
You know, so many countries you can turn to.
Gone down the toilet.
Look at Australia. You look at New Zealand.
I'd sooner not look at Australia.
Look at Australia. You look at New Zealand. You know, look what happened in Sri Lanka over the past few days. You saw the Prime Minister and President running onto a military boat. You know, probably with suitcases filled with cash, fleeing because obviously the people had decided that they had enough. It won't be long before something like that happens here. maybe even in the US. You know, you
Um,
can't fleece a population for so long and essentially
and get away with it
and
forevermore.
essentially force them into destitution, hunger, bordering on famine, you know, without a hope.
Well,
You know,
I
and
don't
then
think
what do
we're.
they do?
I
They
don't think
don't
we're.
resolve the issue. They run away. They run away with all the money that they stole. And it's right that the people went and took the palace. It's right that the people went and burnt down the prime minister's home because they had enough.
But I don't think we're bordering on famine here. Not looking at some of the
No,
people around here in Hackney.
but
Yeah.
there will be a point where you'll see, you know,
Most of them are bordering on not being able to get out of their own front doors. They're that large.
that's another issue, I guess. But things aren't looking good for the Western world in general, I would say.
Well, we go through these periods. It's just historic cycles. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's plenty to bleat about if you look back in history. There's you know the our democracy and other countries is littered with failure, absolutely littered with it.
When was the last time we've had this sort of perfect storm of disaster bubbling? You know, we have a war on our doorstep. We have the worst set of economic data that
Well,
we've
I would
seen
say
in
the
a long, long
1940s.
time. Yeah, look what happened.
You
You know, let's hope we don't get to that sort of.
1970s was dogged by financial instability. And you had, obviously, in between the Second World War and the 1970s, you had the Suez Crisis. I mean, it's just been one long litany of bollocks, really. Let's be about right. Before that, obviously, you had Stanley Baldwin. You had, in between the wars, the General Strike, the Great and the Depression. Before that, you had the First World War. I mean, let's be about right. You could pick any period of history, and there is plenty to look at and go, oh God, what a catastrophic mess. And it's obviously it's hard to see how things are improving when you look out there, especially in today's modern world of media, and not be feel some despair for the state of the world. Because unfortunately, and I've touched on this before, it's cyclical, a lot of it. But the point is, and I made this point once before. Unfortunately, by perpetuity of individuals wanting to hold power over others and become, whether it's prime minister, president, or whatever a role, it takes a degree of narcissism and greed and all sorts of other rather unsavoury psychological characteristics. So you're always, unfortunately, angling towards ending up with something that is rather undesirable. Because it's kind of leaning that way.
By your logic, the issue is democracy.
But the issue isn't democracy. It's the issue is how our democracy functions.
Correct.
With America's democracy, it doesn't function. It's too polarized. I think what we need to see more of is proportional representation. I wouldn't want a presidential system. I would want many heads in Parliament with very fixed incomes, no bloody expenses, from all varieties of life. So, in other words, you wouldn't be able to be a professional politician, and you would be speaking very much on behalf of the people electorate as a proportion of the electorate. So you wouldn't have this kind of. Don't get me wrong. It makes things more difficult.
There's a
but
problem,
many heads.
There's a big problem that you have with that. However, I spoke to a politician from a different country recently who I put this forward to him as well. I said, look, why can't you have a system whereby members of parliament who come in are on a lowered wage but then have a bumper pension on the way out?
Yeah.
And what he essentially said is, as with all services, doesn't matter where you are, you get what you pay for. So he argued that essentially it would make more sense to actually hire MPs who are professionally trained on a much higher wage, but who are also much more accountable
look,
to
come
their
on.
actions.
What amazes me is 1 minute you've got Sajid Javid running the health department. Before that, he was Chancellor. I mean, really?
But what
It's just, in what world where you would be the financial director of a company 1 week and then running a bunch of hospitals the next?
Yeah, what makes you qualified to do that?
Hello.
That's the question.
That is a really big question.
What's your qualification to enter this job?
Correct.
Under this,
I'd
under this
like
situation?
to see in politicians. I don't like these career politicians because the problem is it becomes skewed. What I like to see is somebody who brings some experience to the table from another field.
Doesn't happen.
I do believe that MPs should be. But I mean, we're happy to pay footballers £500,000 a bloody week. Now, I'm not suggesting we pay MPs
But
and
they
ministers
play
that
football
kind
really
of much.
well. They didn't come from cricket.
Hello, they don't do. But yeah, exactly.
Right, they weren't
Our
cricketers.
bunch do Parliament really badly. But what I would say is pay them a bloody good wage, maybe less of them, because in a proportional system you perhaps wouldn't need quite so many.
But have them suitably qualified.
And make them sure that they are different backgrounds, so suitably qualified in different areas. So you'd want people running the health service that had experience in medicine and etc. And the bottom line to it is you'd pay them sufficiently well, and they would not be able to have these ridiculous expenses for building barns, having £200 or £5,000 a roll wallpaper.
Or you take expenses out of the situation altogether.
Exactly.
So one salary, you choose how to use it as
buy
you
your
wish,
own
but that's it.
fucking sandwiches. There'll be none of this moats and duck houses and the like to claim on expenses. That'd be it. Here you are. You paid £100,000 a year. You sort yourself out, and everything else is off limits.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you want smoked salmon sandwiches for your lunch. Well, you bloody well pay for them. You're there to do a job, because in any other walk of life, that's how it goes down.
And it's a public service. Let's not forget what you're doing is for the public good. That
Exactly.
Essentially, I mean, apart from the monetary compensation,
Exactly.
that should be enough of a reward. You'd assume.
Political campaigns tightly controlled, so each everything was fair and plain right across the board, but in a proportional system where you'd be representing, so you wouldn't have parties trying to control things for the party. Everything would be about doing good for the country, because at the end of the day, this is largely the problem.
At the end of the day,
lining each other's pockets.
At the end of the day, there's no MP that will ever vote for proportional representation because it doesn't benefit them. Ultimately, that's the problem.
Well, yes, it's quite. We had this. This was a discussion, I think, back in the 80s, proportional representation, and it's periodically it's come up. But you're right. When push comes to shove, the government in power don't want to because they don't want to be out of power, and that's why we need it. For that very reason, is why we need it. We need a change
on the few points that we agree on. Proportional representation, I think, would definitely even the school board.
Exactly. I mean, look where we are with this current government and this current party, and there's plenty we could say about the Labour Party taking donations from unions and what have you, how that kind of skews things. Equally, the very fact that the Tory party has been taking millions from some of these Russian oligarchs is appalling. It is wrong.
That's across the board. That's not only Conservative Party.
I'm sure you're quite right. I mean, I noticed today.
Listen, what we should say about.
Remember Tony Blair and Bernie Ecclestone.
What we should say
Bernie
about
Ecclestone's being done for fraud at the moment.
Allegedly.
Well, no, he is being done.
Allegedly.
He's being charged.
But they have, but there's no.
Yeah.
There was no proof presented just yet, so it's
alleged. So we'll give you the benefit of the doubt, even though you said you'd take a bullet for Vladimir Putin.
Look, once it comes to the property market in the UK wouldn't be where it is without oligarchs.
Yes. Well, that's a disaster.
No, No.
Well, it's a disaster that half the people in the UK can't afford their own home. And that home
property
ownership
market,
is at its lowest ebb
Simon.
for God knows how long.
The property market would have been in the toilet without the likes
Yeah,
of
well, every now and then it needs to be.
Russian, ex-Soviet Union, Chinese, and Arabic money.
Yes, well, sometimes
our
it needs-
economy would be in
Yeah.
the toilet without
Well,
them.
I'm sorry, but
Not only that, but also very, very large property sales. We're talking office buildings, hotels, large industrial sites. They've kept the economy going, whether you like it or not.
look,
We might have taken dirty money, but without it, we would have been in a worse position today than we were 20 years ago. That is an absolute...
That's not a good advert. It's not a good reason to be taking dirty money.
It's a fact.
You know,
London is one of the most corrupt places on the planet.
Yes, and unfortunately now we're going to be paying the price for that.
Potentially.
Exactly. There's my point. Anyway, so
Let's
there's
wrap
plenty
it
we
up.
do agree on. Time to wrap it up. So whatever your thoughts are, mostly none of you have got a fucking choice. We've just got to sit on the sidelines and watch this charade. This sort of, how can I say, poor substitute for Britain's Got Talent over the summer. As in this situation, it's more like Britain's Got No Talent, and see what we end up with on September the 5th. And on that note, it leads me, of course, to the quote of the day. Robert Byrne. Democracy is being allowed to vote for the candidate you dislike the least. And on that note, have a great day.